It's been a really difficult past several years in the workforce, particularly for women. And if you're feeling exhausted or depleted, that's a normal response to what has been happening. And it doesn't mean that you have to give up on yourself or your goals and your dreams. And in fact, you have a beautiful invitation to learn to go after your dreams in a way that honors the fact that you are a human being who not only expends energy, but also needs rest and restoration in order to continue expending that energy.
Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jess. I'm the host and creator of the Art of Speaking Up podcast, and I'm a coach for women. And today's episode is completely different than any other episode topic that I have ever done before. But I wanted to record an episode on the idea of feeling mentally exhausted. Number one, because it's a theme that I'm seeing come up quite a bit. I'm seeing it in my client work. It's feeling like things are hard. People are feeling tired. It's been a very rough past few years for working women. And I also wanted to do this episode topic this week in particular because it's Thanksgiving week. Things are winding down. And this felt like the perfect week for me to do an episode about the theme of feeling tired. And more importantly, about the theme of rejuvenating and filling yourself up with restoration and rest. This episode is for you if you feel torn in two directions. On the one hand, there's one part of you that wants to grow and focus on your personal and professional growth and really wants to stretch yourself and put your all into it. But then on the other hand, there's this other part of you that feels really tired and feels like some days it's really difficult to keep going. And this episode is intended to help you in your process of resolving that conflict, because I know from my own personal experience that being in that state of conflict and dissonance doesn't feel good. It feels really uncomfortable. And it sort of feels like if you go deeper into your growth process, then the part of you that's tired is being neglected. But if you slow down and rest, then you're neglecting your goals and your growth process. And what I want to offer in today's episode are some paths forward that actually allow you to meet the needs of both of those parts of you simultaneously. It's a path forward that allows you to deepen into your growth process while also feeling like you are offering yourself the restoration and the rejuvenation that you need to keep showing up for yourself, keep showing up for your job, and keep showing up for your own goals and dreams. So what I'm going to do in today's episode is I'm going to start by sharing with you my thoughts on why you might be feeling a very particular kind of mental and psychological exhaustion at this point in time. This perspective is informed by my client work and me having spent the past several years in intimate conversations with professional women, really seeing what they're going through and grappling with. And I'm sharing that with the intention of helping you understand why you might be feeling the way you're feeling, because I find that when we can understand why we feel the way we feel and we can put a narrative behind it, it can feel like relief because it suddenly makes sense. And then that relief makes us feel hopeful and it makes us feel like there's a path forward and like we're going to find a way out of it. And so that's why I want to talk about why you might be feeling mentally exhausted. And then more importantly, I want to share a few different ideas with you that will help you approach your personal and professional growth in a way that doesn't feel like it's draining the life force out of you. Because so many of us, and I say this because I completely relate to this, so many of us are perfectionists or recovering perfectionists. We have a type A, get it done personality. And sometimes we bring all those perfectionist tendencies, some of which are keeping us stuck, but we bring those tendencies into our growth process and into the work that we're doing on ourselves. And it makes our growth process exhausting. And it's not actually that personal growth is exhausting. It's that our old habits that we're trying to grow out of through the personal growth is exhausting. And we're bringing those old habits with us into the personal growth. And it's making it seem like the personal growth is exhausting when really it's our old ways of thinking that are draining our mental life force. So I want to talk about that just a little bit and help you identify some paths forward where you can indulge your need for growth and your need for rest and rejuvenation at the same time. And one thought that I just want to share before I get into this is I think that as women, we are often conditioned to believe and told out in the world that we can't have the things we want and have rest. There are just so many messages out there that cause us to not just associate achieving our goals with feeling exhausted and depleted, but it's almost like that's what society expects of us. Like society expects that we should do all these things and show up for all these things. And yes, we can go out and achieve things, but we have to put so much into it and kind of wear ourselves all the way down. And I think it's an act of sacred rebellion for us to explore the question of how can I have the things that I want in my career and in my life? And how can I also have the balance, the rest, the restoration, the rejuvenation that I desire? And while it can be challenging to pursue both, of course it's challenging. We all have unique life circumstances and challenges. I think it's this really important way of us taking up space as women is when we say, okay, I want to try to make the things that I want happen, but in a way that feels sustainable and balanced to me. So with that said, I want to talk about why you might be feeling mentally or perhaps physically exhausted. But I guess I'm more talking about mental and psychological exhaustion in today's episode. And I'm sharing this because in my coaching practice, I have gone on a journey. So I started my coaching business in 2020 during the pandemic. And so as I have been working with professional women, I have been intimately peering into the lives and psychological experiences of professional women during a very unique time in history where we've experienced a pandemic that impacted the entire global workforce. And we've also experienced the aftermath of that. And a lot of those experiences have had a significant impact on the quality of life of working women. And I'm hoping that by me sharing that perspective and sharing what I've observed in the intimate conversations with my clients over the years, my hope is that sharing that is going to make you feel like nothing is wrong with you. You haven't done something wrong here. You haven't failed. Things have just been really freaking hard for working women for all time, but especially over the past 4 years. So let's talk about what has happened over the past 4 years. First, we had a global pandemic that started in 2020. Not only was this mentally exhausting because it was scary and our health and our loved ones were at risk and some people lost loved ones, which is such a horrific tragedy. Not only were we processing all of that, the entire world was basically processing all of that, but with that came a drastic lifestyle shift that had an enormous impact on working women, where all of a sudden, anyone who's a mom who has kids who go out to school or go out to daycare, all of a sudden those kids were home for an extended period of time. And let me remind you that during this time, working women were expected to tend to their children's needs, to make sure that their children were getting set up with whatever sort of remote education infrastructure everyone was trying to kind of get together as quickly as possible. And women were simultaneously expected to show up fully for their professional lives, for work meetings, all while still doing the multitude of tasks and household duties that women are often implicitly expected to do and that women often hold the burden of doing. I think that being a professional working mother is already asking so much of a human. And then you add on to that the fact that now there was no separation in terms of children's schooling and childcare, and then the work environment. That just created an entirely unsustainable, in my opinion, unsustainable existence for professional women. A normal solution to that would be like, oh, okay, you now have an unsustainable amount of things that you're responsible for. Let's figure out how we can create flexibility for you, solve around that, right? But that's not what happened. What happened was like, oh, you have an unsustainable amount of obligations to fulfill. Well, just go figure it out. You figured it out every other time. Go figure out how to do it and don't bother us, right? So that was the starting point. And what happened was, as things started to stabilize and as children finally went back to school, which relieved some of the burden on working women, particularly women who are moms. And again, I'm not saying that the pandemic wasn't hard on women who don't have children, because I'm going to be really real with you all. Sometimes, like when I say something like this, I will get a nastygram in my inbox being like, are you saying that you don't support women who don't have children? I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that the pandemic was particularly difficult, in my opinion, for working moms. I do not have children myself, so I'm not biased against anyone who doesn't have children. But that being said, by the time things started to stabilize and kids went back to school, then working moms finally could breathe a sigh of relief. And this, again, applies to women who have kids and also women who don't have kids. And as women adjusted to things feeling slightly more normal, then workplaces and employers started mandating return to office. And for some, it was like a fast ripping of a Band-Aid. And for some employers, it was like a slow, painful peeling off of a Band-Aid, where all of a sudden women went through this period that was intensely demanding, things stabilized. And then some of the stability that was created through remote work was then withdrawn and taken away. And that was yet another burden placed on professional women. But the story doesn't end there. After then returning to the workplace, which has happened for so many professionals, not just women, but after returning to the workplace, there was yet again another wave of difficulty and challenge. And that wave was companies that started doing major reorgs, major layoffs, major restructuring. So many people were either laid off, but not only that, I had so many women that I worked with who, even though they didn't get laid off, it was extremely emotionally taxing to be in a work environment where their coworkers were getting let go, or they were being switched to a different team, or the expectations for their role were suddenly incredibly ambiguous and unclear. So when companies restructure and do layoffs, I think sometimes what happens is, of course, if you get laid off, that is very stressful. But if you don't get laid off, I think in a way it's its own difficult experience, because you're supposed to be grateful, right? You still have your job. You didn't get laid off, but you are left with the stress, the anxiety, and the psychological damage of having endured not just one layoff, but for so many companies, it has been multiple rounds, one after the other. And as someone who when I was in my corporate career, I was in companies that had many layoffs. I was never actually laid off, but the psychological impact on me was enormous. Again, this is not like a woe is me thing, right? I'm not saying that I wasn't grateful to have had the stability to keep my job. But what I am saying is that even if you haven't been laid off, you're allowed to feel like it's difficult. You're allowed to feel like it's hard. Your feelings and experiences are valid. And of course, if you have been laid off, your feelings and experiences and struggles are also incredibly valid. And the job market out there is bananas, right? Like I have been supporting clients since 2020. The job market over the past year has been something like I have not seen before. So all of these factors combined, pandemic, being at home with children, then that finally stabilizing and having to return to the office, which had a huge lifestyle impact, huge impact on stress levels. then having to endure multiple rounds of reorgs and layoffs and possibly being laid off. All of these things are going to have a cumulative impact on one's enjoyment and fulfillment and energy levels in their role. And regardless of what your personal life circumstances might be, right? We all have things that come up in life that make things difficult and that can be really draining. But regardless of what other circumstances you might be dealing with, that is the baseline, right? Like that is the baseline that we're working with. So if you feel drained, if you feel exhausted, and by the way, I haven't even covered all of the difficult global events that have been happening, right? Like I just shared a sliver, like a slice of the pie of what's been difficult. But if you feel like things have been hard, this is normal. This is a normal reaction to what has been happening. And I think that it's a beautiful, beautiful opportunity for you to prioritize your own rest and rejuvenation. And the way that I think about it is I really think that things happen in cycles. Like I think the idea of like a wave that moves up and down or like a cycle that cycles through different phases, I think that's a really great way to think about our growth and our evolution is that we're going to go through periods where we have high energy and we're going to go through periods where we're in more of a restorative cycle where we don't have the highest energy. And that's okay too. But what I would love for you to open up your thinking to is the idea that you working on yourself, working on your confidence, working on your professional development and personal development does not have to come at the cost of you tending to your need for rest. And I want to offer 3 ideas that will help you see that there are steps you can take and shifts that you can make that will help satisfy not just your need for rest, but your need for growth. Because the truth is, there's so many shifts that I support my clients in making that not only help them grow, but help them feel more present, more energized, and more alive. And it is true that there are steps that we can take that can serve both our need for rest and our need for growth. But if you're a perfectionist, type A overachiever, which welcome to the club, you're in great company. But if you identify with some of those personality traits, that might not have occurred to you. It might be a novel idea for you to consider that there are activities that could rejuvenate you and restore you and also help you grow. So let's talk about what those activities are. There are 3 ideas that I want to share with you that I think will be really helpful. They are 1, finding kindness and softness in your process. 2, setting goals based on enjoyment and pleasure. And 3, moving towards your goals in a way that feels good to you. So let's talk about the first one, finding softness and kindness and compassion. Across the board, when I am working with my clients to help them feel more confident, to help them become a more confident voice in the room, one of the first things that I focus on with them is their self-talk and their inner dialogue. This is so important that I dedicate an entire 2 months in my program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy, just to doing focused work on inner dialogue and self-talk, because our inner dialogue and how we are speaking to ourselves has an enormous impact on the range of actions that we feel bold and brave enough to take. So if we're trying to take up more space, if we're trying to speak with more confidence, we have to learn to talk to ourselves internally in a way that facilitates that. We have to learn not to be so mean to ourselves and not to be so harsh on ourselves. And we actually have to learn to lead ourselves and speak to ourselves in an empowering way that helps us not just feel more capable, but take the strong, bold, confident actions of a leader. Now, what's interesting is when you look at your inner dialogue and when you get better at disconnecting from being very negative towards yourself, very mean to yourself, very hard on yourself, very harsh in the way that you talk to yourself. When you disconnect from that, and it's a habit, it's a practice that you get better at, and you learn to instead talk to yourself and dialogue with yourself in a way that is empowering, supportive, but especially in a way that is compassionate and kind, not only does that help you take bold action, but that is also way, way less exhausting than being caught in the spin of your own negative thoughts all day long. So this is great news because we have identified one of the things that creates exhaustion, which is getting stuck in being really mean to ourselves and really identifying with that harsh, critical voice inside our heads. We have identified that if we can do less of that, and if we can offer ourselves a bit more kindness, a bit more understanding, if we can speak to ourselves the way we would speak to a friend, not only will that support our personal and professional growth because we will feel brave and we will take much bolder, more effective action. We will speak up more. We will sound more confident when we speak. Not only that, but we will be far less exhausted. So if you are looking for the ultimate win-win in personal and professional development, learning to disconnect from that constant stream of psychological negativity and learning to empower yourself internally is one of the best things you can do, both for your growth and for your sense of peace and balance in your life. I feel so strongly about this. This is why I spend a lot of time focusing on this when I'm doing client work in my program, because it is truly one of the most important things. And one way to figure out if this is something that will help you feel less exhausted is just to notice if you are fueling your personal growth with negative thoughts about yourself. A lot of times, our personal growth process is being motivated by thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, everyone's better than me, I feel like a loser, I never get it right, I'm always messing things up. If our personal growth and our efforts towards personal growth are motivated by those thoughts, then of course our personal growth is going to feel exhausting. It's just so important to realize that the thing that's exhausting isn't the growth itself. The thing that's exhausting is our thoughts. And that's something that we can learn to shift. And as we learn to shift that, we can find a form of personal growth that feels rejuvenating and restorative. So that's the first thing that I want to share. The second thing that I want to share, and I feel so strongly about this, and this is so important, is that as a woman, you deserve to set goals and set dreams that are based on your enjoyment, your happiness, and your pleasure. This is so, so important. I think about this spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, we have joy, we have happiness, enjoyment, pleasure, like all these really wonderful feelings that we are so deserving of as women. And then on the other side of that spectrum, we have stress and rushing and pushing ourselves and being harsh and just like all of these bad feelings, overworking, depleting ourselves, like lots of bad stuff on the other end of that spectrum. And I think for a lot of us, we associate achievement with the bad stuff, like the pushing ourselves, the depleting ourselves, the overworking, having to feel and be really intense. We have this automatic association that to achieve means to suffer. It means to suffer our way to the achievement. And I just want to offer that you are allowed to set goals based on what is going to feel good and sustainable to you. This is so important because so often the goals that we set have this idea of overworking baked in. And that's all we learn to do. It's all we see other people role modeling. But what if your goal could be whatever you want it to be? And what if your goal could be something that when you imagine it, instead of feeling exhausted by it, you feel light and airy and excited by it? What is a goal that excites you and that feels the opposite of exhausting, that feels grounding and exciting and energizing. I think as women, we literally aren't taught to think this way. Like we're just taught to be useful to other people. And all we know is like, how can I show up and be useful to other people? And so I really think, and I'm speaking from personal experience, so take what works for you, right? But I really think that because we are so conditioned to serve others, to be useful to other people, I think it is very difficult for us to conceptualize what it means for us to experience pure enjoyment. I just think that idea, like intellectually, we might feel like we know what it is, but I think it's really hard for that concept to really lodge itself into our unconscious mind in a potent way where we can really embody that. And so I think a lot of times when we set goals and dreams, we set them with this underlying assumption of like, this has to be hard, this has to be painful, this has to be exhausting. And it's not like we're doing that consciously. It's just this unconscious piece that we attach to it. It's got to be tiring. It's got to deplete me. It can't feel good. And what I want to invite you to do is to create a vision for who you want to be. Maybe it's in 3 years, maybe it's in 5 years, maybe it's in 1 year. Like think of a time frame where you believe that if you stay focused on and committed to your growth in that time frame, you could achieve meaningful change. So pick whatever time frame that is, 6 months, 12 months, 1 year, 3 years, just pick any time frame. But I want you to ask yourself, what would feel good for me at the end of that time frame? What version of myself would I feel so good to have evolved into? What job title will I feel so good to have? And what will that look like day to day? And how will that feel? And I want you to really think of a goal and a direction that doesn't feel exhausting, but that feels life-giving. So maybe some examples of what that could be is, okay, I feel confident in a way where I am not nearly as drained by some of my ruminating and some of my negative thoughts that are constantly popping up. I've really been able to learn to disconnect from that. And as a result, I'm so much more present, and getting through the workday or the work week is so much less tiring. I've been promoted into a big role, and my salary is big enough that I don't have to worry about my financial situation. It's created so much ease and choice in my life. And with that title, I have freedom to do my work and lead my team in the way that I want to. And I'm able to get a lot done without work bleeding into my personal life in ways that don't work for me. I have balance. I have all of the things I want. I feel confident. I feel good about myself. I'm enjoying the work that I'm doing. I'm achieving a lot of success, but it doesn't feel like it's coming at the cost of my own wellness and sanity. I want you to really think about what that could look like. Because yes, it can be a challenge to bring that to life, of course. But if we want to bring it to life, and if we know it's going to be a challenge, we for sure have to set ourselves up for success by getting clear on exactly what it is we are creating. Because if we are not clear on what we are creating, we are probably going to create something that is going to lean more towards exhausting, depleting, overextending. So we really want to think about when we're setting our goals, when you're setting your goal, it gets to be anything you effing want it to be. It gets to look however you want it to look. And yes, it might take some effort to bring it to life, but you are allowed to aim for what feels good to you. You do not have to sacrifice yourself. You do not have to overgive. You do not have to overextend. You get to decide what you want and how you want that to feel and how you want to feel. And I encourage you to set goals that when you think about them, instead of feeling stressed and contracted and exhausted, you feel expanded and energized and genuinely excited. And the final thing that I want to share with you is that the steps to reaching that goal that you set, so once you set that goal that feels good and that actually feels like it's infused with the joy and pleasure and happiness that you deserve, once you've set that goal, I just want to offer that While the process of bringing a goal to life, whether it's a promotion, whether it's you feeling more confident, like whatever the goal is, while the process of bringing that goal to life does require effort and it does require you to put energy into it, the net impact of that process should be giving you energy. It should be giving you energy because even when you stretch yourself and do something scary that requires a lot of energy, you celebrate yourself in a way that feels so freaking big, and you have other people around you celebrating you in a way that makes you feel elated and in a way that restores you and recharges you. This is why I celebrate so much with my clients. We have to learn that we deserve celebration, and we also have to bring energy back into our process. We have to learn to keep feeling good along the way, because if we keep feeling good along the way, we're going to want to keep going. And if we keep going, we're going to reach the thing that we want. And we're also going to not feel exhausted and depleted when we get to it. So it looks like you celebrating yourself and allowing yourself to take in the goodness, take in the accomplishment, take in the joy, feel good when you accomplish a milestone. And by the way, that milestone could be that you stepped outside your comfort zone and got the outcome that you want. But it also could be that you just stepped outside your comfort zone, and that counts as an accomplishment. Even if it didn't go perfectly, you do not have to exhaust yourself by beating yourself up. You can say to yourself, I'm a freaking badass. I was willing to do that. Imagine who I will become if I keep being that person who is willing to do the hard, scary thing, even though I am imperfect. I guarantee if you learn to say that to yourself after you put yourself out there and it doesn't go perfectly, guarantee that over the long run, you will feel far less exhausted and far more energized as you move towards your goals. So what I want to leave you with in summary is that it's been a really difficult past several years in the workforce, particularly for women and particularly for women who have kids. And if you're feeling exhausted or depleted, that's really normal. That's a normal response to what has been happening. And it doesn't mean that you have to give up on yourself or your goals and your dreams. And in fact, you have a beautiful invitation to learn to go after your dreams in a way that honors the fact that you are a human being who not only expends energy, but also needs rest and restoration in order to continue expending that energy. And a few ways that you can do that are, number one, by getting better at being kind and understanding towards yourself, no matter the circumstances. Number two, by setting goals that are infused with joy and happiness and what actually feels good to you. And number three, by learning to move towards your goals in a way that feels good and rewarding and sustainable. And a huge part of that is learning to honor your efforts and celebrate yourself, not just for the wins, but for the bold, brave, badass attempts that you are willing to make along the way. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you have a beautiful, restful, rejuvenating Thanksgiving and a new perspective on how you can create the things that matter most to you and honor your needs as a human. I will catch you in next week's episode. Have an amazing, safe holiday, and we'll talk soon. Bye.